Welcome back. In this project video, we're going to go ahead and redo a project video that we did a long time ago, probably around 2016 or maybe 17. We did a pancake knife sheath project video. It was one of our early videos, early project videos, and we also offered a companion pack for that video with a bunch of tooling patterns and stuff like that. If you're following on our Monday videos, I've mentioned we kind of revamped the pancake knife sheath pattern that I put out at that time, and the one that I've used for years. I just added a little bit more meat down here on the bottom. The actual pattern hasn't changed a whole lot, so if you've already purchased that older pattern, you can certainly use those tooling patterns on this. You may just have to modify them just a little bit. But we're going to go ahead and make I'm going to make 6 of these in the video because I need to make some more for the sales floor for Christmas. I would suggest you, if you make these, I would go ahead, if you've only got an order for a couple, go ahead and make a half dozen. Make a dozen if you got time. These things always sell well. They're just really good things to kind of keep around. They make great stocking stuffers. They make just great little birthday gifts, Father's Day gifts, whatever. You can also stick a really nice little case knife in there. That's what this pattern is for a case trapper, a double blade trapper. Very common knife that most people carry, and other knives will fit in here. You'll just have to kind of check and see, and they can be adjusted to fit different knives as well. And in the future, we'll probably do some different knife sheaths for other knives as well and offer some more patterns for that. The main reason that I wanted to redo this video was just to have an updated version of the pattern pack out there with some newer floral patterns. We do offer a material pack for this, so if you're wanting to make some of these out of Herman Oak Leather, that's all we cut really here in the shop as far as veg tan. And so we are offering these in a 3-pack and a 6-pack, and we'll put a link down in the description where you can get that. You may have already known that and already gotten some of these. They're a really great way to use up your scrap leather. Cutting them out by hand can be a little difficult and time consuming, but they're not horrible. But in the video, I'm going to show you just how I put these together. It's not going to be a whole lot different than what we did in the previous video that we did a few years ago, but I just wanted to mainly give an opportunity for us to go over and refresh assembly of these things, as well as to offer a new pattern pack with all new patterns in there. There's 15 new floral patterns in here that you can use, and like I said, you can also use these on the older pattern if you got those, or use the older patterns rather for the new style. It's not that much different, and so if you've got that one, this is a completely new updated version with the cut patterns as well. This is only available in a digital download at this time, so if you want to get that, it'll print out 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. If you do purchase this pattern pack, be sure and print it out actual size or 100%. Don't allow your printer to scale to fit or fit to page. We do have a marker on here or a gauge on here for the slot. The slot should be 2 inches long, so when you print it out, just check that and make sure that you printed out the correct size. But we're going to hop right into the video. We're going to make, like I said, a half dozen of these real quick, and I'm going to kind of show you how I go about doing that just to refresh everybody. So let's get into it. All right, so I've got a piece of 910 out right here. I'm gonna go ahead and cut out, this is the butt off of the side of 910. I'm gonna go ahead and cut out some knife sheaths. I'm gonna cut the front and the back out. We're gonna go ahead and cut out 6 of them. So we're gonna put 6 of them together for the sales floor. I'm gonna cut these out on our clicker and show you that real quick. Just kind of show you how that works. If you are buying our material packs, that's where these are coming from, is from the we're clicking them out here in the shop, and then we'll pull them down just a little bit so they're a hair thinner than 9/10 ounce. So I've got our front die here. I've got 2 dies. I've got the front and the back. So we'll go ahead and cut out 6 fronts. Set this on here. So now I've got all 6 fronts ready to go. I'll go ahead and cut the backs out now. Six backs, 6 fronts. So now we've got our splitter set up here. We'll go ahead and run these through here. Like I said, I just want to thin them down just a little bit. You could build them out of 910 completely, but I think it makes them just a hair heavy. I'm just pulling just a little bit off of them. All our pieces are ready to go. All right, so here we got our front piece. We're going to go ahead and do the tooling on these. We're just going to show a little bit of the tooling. Right here I've got a little jig that I made, and it's out of paper. It's not going to last very long. I'd probably recommend making one out of something a little bit stouter, but it's working for this for now. And it's just got the tooling window, so we'll just trace out the tooling window, and we'll also go ahead and make the marks where the interior stitch lines are going to be. And these are what actually make this particular scabbard fit a certain size knife. Alright, so now we've got our pattern drawn on there, so you can do floral tooling in there, basket stamping in there, anything like that. We're going to go ahead and draw our floral pattern now. Okay, so now we've got all our pieces tooled. Like I said, I'm making a half a dozen of these knife sheaths, so I've got 6 of these. I just went ahead and did 2 florals, one of my patterns, and then one of these that's in the pattern pack. And then I'm doing these 4 here that are just basket stamped. Like I said, I'm just trying to make inventory for the sales floor, but that'll kind of show you a little bit of the tooling on there. And then we're going to go ahead and start putting these together. We've let these dry just a little bit. I've got our backs as well. And what I like to do first is to take a number 3 edger. So from about the middle of this rise here and middle of this rise here, I like to edge this area right in here, because these sheets are going to go together flesh side to flesh side just like this. And so we want to go ahead and edge this because it's going to be hard to edge and slick once it's put together. So we're going to go ahead and do that on all these pieces now. So we'll go ahead and edge all the tooled pieces first, and then we'll edge the backs. So like I said, we're just going to start right there. And I like to do both sides and go ahead and just get those edged. Now while we can get to them, we'll go ahead and do all these. And so now we'll take the back pieces and we'll go ahead and do the same from the same points there, just that middle section of the very top. And so now we'll get our slicking stuff together here, and we're just going to slick just those parts that we edged, and then we'll let those dry, and we'll go ahead and dye those if you're going to dye edges. If you're not going to dye edges, don't worry about it. We can move on to assembly. I'm going to go ahead and dye the edges of these, and so we'll go ahead and let this dry a little bit, and then we'll go back and dye the tops of both of these pieces, and then we'll be ready to assemble them. So we've given these a chance to dry a little bit, so now we'll just come in here and just add dye just to the top. You don't have to worry about dyeing the outer edges just yet. We'll do that after we put them together. Alright, so now our edges have had time to dry, and so like I said, we just dyed just the very top, okay? Don't worry about any of this because we're going to sand and do all that. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and assemble these. Pancake sheets are real easy to assemble because all you do is take the back piece, lay it down, and the front piece. We're going to glue those together and just line up these top edges right here. And they don't have to be perfect. Sometimes when you tool, that's why the back piece is a little bit wider than the front piece, because depending on how hard you tool or how much tooling you put on these, they can stretch a little bit, and so we want to be able to kind of have room to move that around if we need to make sure everything lines up. But basically all we want is just these top points here to line up good enough to where if we need, we can trim off a little bit or sand, but we've got it on the meat of the back piece all the way around. So what we'll do is we'll just put glue around here where the slots are going to go, basically everywhere the tooling isn't, but don't get too far in. We're going to sew really close to the tooling right here, but don't get your glue too close in on the bottom especially. We just want to get enough to hold them together so we can sew them. So you could actually just do the outer edge here and the outer edge here, and then we'll glue them together. So we'll get all these glued up. I will let that glue set up and let those get tacky. We're only going to do one coat on these. You got to remember when you're building knife sheaths, you need to build them pretty quick because there's not a whole lot of there's a lot of margin on them, but you're not going to ask a ton of money for them. So I want to be able to put them together pretty quickly. I usually do 2 coats of glue on everything that I do, but on these we just need enough glue to hold them together. We're going to do so much sewing on them that it's not important that they're just super adhesive when we put them together. We just want them to hold in place as we sew them on the machine. Alright, these have had a minute just to dry. It didn't take very long. Like I said, we're just doing 1 coat, and we're just going to lay these on there. And like I said, line up these tops best you can. You can trim some of this off, so if anything, let them overhang out the bottom just a little bit. You can trim that off with your knife. And you're going to find that some of these will, like I said, line up differently depending on how that leather's stretched. Knife sheaths, traditionally, they're cut from scrap leather. They're cut from, you don't know where in the hide that came from a lot of times, and so some of them will stretch more than others when you go to tooling on them. And so you always want to leave yourself a little more room. You can see here how much extra we have around there, and on this one we're almost right at it. So, and basket stamp is going to cause things to stretch more than anything else, I think. You're hitting every square inch of that just about, and so it ends up stretching a little bit more than, say, the floral ones if you're doing floral tooling or something like that. You can see on this floral one how much extra I have there. I don't know why you would think that floral would stretch just as much as basket stamp, if not more, but I found that most of the time it doesn't. Basket stamp's one of the worst things as far as when it comes to stretch. Any kind of set stamp, crazy stamp, basket stamp, anything. And it could be too, like I said, this may have been cut out like a butt piece instead of a belly piece or something like that. But we'll work up scraps, and there may be little pieces of leather like that I'm cutting sheaths out of for the floor, and you don't really know where it came from. Sometimes you can tell. All right, we'll gather these up and we'll go ahead and Just give them a little tap with a hammer and then groove them. We'll be ready to stitch them. Okay, so we've got these glued. I like to give them a little tap with a hammer just to make sure that glue adheres. I've had a few people ask me that, email me and ask why I hit everything with a hammer when I glue things together. It's just to make sure that we get a good contact with that cement, and we want to make sure that everything glues together well. And you definitely don't have to do that. A lot of guys will just use a piece of glass and rub it. I don't feel like that does the same. I think that even with one coat of glue, just a nice little tap with a flat-faced hammer, it just helps to make sure that glue sticks good. I don't know, maybe it's from saddle making, but we hit everything. So maybe I just like using my hammer and just hitting stuff, but that's the way I do it. You can certainly do whatever you think is best. If you think it's better just to push on it like that, that's fine too, whatever. Now, like we mentioned in the tooling part, I made this little jig. It's not going to last very long. It's only got a little piece of paper there and there, so eventually it's going to break. But it's working now for this. It'd probably be a good idea if you get the pattern pack to go ahead and, if you have access to a laser or somebody that can make you an acrylic template, it might be nice to make one of these out of an acrylic template and then put 2 good sized holes there that you can fit a pencil in for these stitch line dots here. And you could also just set a set of calipers right beside this on the distance, but I find this little thing works out pretty good, and we'll just use a straight edge. So just make a mark there, make a mark there, and then we'll take our straight edge and just lay that across there between the 2 dots and draw a line. That's going to be our stitch line near the tooling, and that's going to be, and those 2 stitch lines are really what determines how this sheath, what size knife it fits within reason. Like if you had one that was pretty close to a case trapper but a little bit bigger or something like that, you could move these out just a little bit, but you're going to be limited because we are going to put a slot there, a big 2-inch slot. So if you wanted to expand this pattern, you would go out this way for a bigger knife, and if you got a longer knife, you can come down this way with it. So that's how you would adjust this. But in general, I like to keep my tooling window pretty well sized for the knife that it's going to be made for. So we'll get all these done here. Okay, so we've got our stitch line marked on all of these. So now we're going to groove them. First thing I like to do is go ahead and go around the edge. You want to set your groover. And you don't have to groove these. If you don't have a groover or don't want to groove them, don't. It's not a big deal. I just do it because that's how I work. But I'll start right here at the top point, and we'll just groove around the perimeter of the sheath. And then I'm going to groove all of these. But what I'm going to show you right now is this. I'll open this particular one. This is a Horseshoe brand groover made by Jeremiah Watt. I just open it up all the way, and then I can hold it like this, and I can start from here, and I can kind of freehand with it, which makes it really nice because you don't necessarily, like I said, you don't have to groove stuff, but I like the way it looks, and being able to freehand inside the perimeter of our piece makes it really handy. And so that way we'll have a groove there we can sew in. Like I said, if you don't want to groove, just scribe you a line on there and sew on that line. But I'm going to go ahead and get all these grooved. I'm going to get my groover reset. The way I usually do this is I'll set my groover for the perimeter, and I'll do all of them, and then I'll open it up and do all my vertical lines on all of them. So we'll go ahead and get that done. We'll be ready to sew these. Alright, so now we're ready to go. All of them are grooved. So now we'll go to the sewing machine and we'll get all these sewed up. This is the way I like to do knife sheaths. Do them all at one time. It's a lot easier if you've got 4, 5, 6 orders, 12 orders, whatever. Just get them all tooled and then put them all together at one time. It's much faster, much more efficient than doing them one at a time. Alright, so anytime I'm sewing one of these pancake sheets, one of the things I like to do anytime I'm sewing anything is if I can make one circle basically, or do it all at one time. So that's going to be the way we're going to sew it. So you've got to kind of think about this when you're sewing it. But the way I sew them is I'll start at this vertical line here, so the sheath is facing away from me, and I'll start here at the bottom, and we'll be able to come from there. We'll sew up here all the way around here, and then we'll stop and back stitch here. That's going to allow us to make one pass without having to, some people will sew, you know, start here, sew around, and then come back in and sew the two verticals. If you'll kind of look at your work on and try to see if there's a way that you can position it to where you can do it all in one pass, it makes it a lot easier to sew. So you'll see that here when we do this. So as you can see, we made one complete pass around there. We never had to stop and reset the machine or, you know, start over. When you get down to this end over here, as you can see, I kind of stopped a little short because there's not a hole there. Right ahead of that line is a actual middle of the stitch. I don't get too worried about that. I think it looks a little cleaner if you just stop instead of trying to make it down to that hole or that hole over there. So just kind of play that by ear. You don't necessarily have to end in the hole, but it does look nice. But like I said, that's how I do those. And so we'll get the rest of these all sewn up. Now that time when I came around, there was a hole right at the end of the groove, so I went ahead and went in that hole. Like I said, I don't think it matters either way. Whatever you think works best. So now we got all these sewed, we'll just cut our threads. I've had a few people ask about this knife again recently, and it's just an X-Acto knife. You're going to want to get the bigger barrel. It's a lot bigger diameter than the usual X-Acto knives, and then these are just, the blades in there are just the little injector blades, just like you'd put in one of these skivers. So now we'll just take our knife and we'll go ahead and trim. I have a sanding machine, so that's what I sand on. But if you're going to want to go ahead and trim these and then sand them. You can sand them with just a sandpaper on a wood block like we've used in the past, or you can use a machine like Leather Machine Co. makes, or just a benchtop sander, whatever you want to use. But we'll sand these after we get them all trimmed. Alright, so now we've got these all sanded. I'm going to come in here with my round sander just because my sander back there isn't, the radius of that sanding wheel is a little bit bigger than these little areas in here. So I'm going to go ahead and catch those with a round sander. So now I'm going to take a number 4 edger. We're just going to edge around the whole sheath. Once we get them all edged, we'll get them slicked and we'll let them dry for a little bit, and then we'll dye the edges, and then we'll be ready to add some oil to these. Alright, so these sheets have had time to dry, the edges, and so now we'll come in here and we're just going to dye the edges here. Get all these dyed, then they'll be ready for oil, and then the only thing else we'll have to do is punch the slots. Alright, so we've let our edges, that dye dry just a little bit, doesn't take very long, and then we're going to go ahead and oil these. I'm not going to do any kind of antiquing or anything on these, but if you wanted to antique them or dye them or do any paint work or anything like that, you're going to want to do that on the fronts before you start assembling those. I would go ahead and do all your two-toning, your antiquing, all of that. You can completely finish the fronts and then assemble. So after tooling, that's when you would do your dye work and paint work or antiquing, any of that kind of thing, and then come in and start assembling those. Since I'm doing these just light oil, like light to medium oil is all we're doing for the ones that are going on the sales floor, then I just wait to do it all at the end. I do it all at one time. It's just kind of just the process that I use, and it works great for me. So that's the way we're going to do these. We're just going to put a nice coat of oil on there. I am using olive oil, which is what I always use for my oil on leather, on veg tan stuff. And so just regular olive oil, pumice oil. You can get that on Amazon. You can get it at your local grocery store, whatever you want to do. We're just going to put a good coat on here and then let that set for a little while, let it even out. And then we'll throw some bag coat on them or tin coat on them, and we'll be done. Alright, so I gave these just a few minutes there just to kind of soak up a little bit of oil. I'm not real particular on the finish when I'm doing a light oil or a medium oil with no antiquing or anything like that. You can actually just put your oil on there, put a good coat on there, and then let it sit for just a minute, and then go ahead and put your tan coat on there, and it'll even itself out underneath the tan coat, so we're not super worried about it unless you've got an area that's like really, really dark and you don't think it's going to lighten. You might want to wait to go with your tan coat until that has done everything it's going to do, maybe even 2 or 3 hours, and then assess it from there. But I'm pretty confident on this finish on how it's going to turn out, so we're going to go ahead and just, for the sake of the video, we're going to go ahead and get this done, and I'm just going to put me a good coat of tan coat on all of these, and this will be our final finish. If you don't mind dirty stitches, like if you don't mind your stitches being not white, you can absolutely go ahead and antique these after this tan coat dries. I prefer not to do that. I prefer to do it at the beginning before or right after I tool, before I assemble them. It just makes it a little easier and cleaner, and then my stitches are nice and white on these. So we'll just put this tan coat on here and let that dry real good, and then we'll be ready to punch our 2-inch slots. Alright, so these have had a chance to dry. And so what we need to do now is just make our slots here for the belt loops, or for the belt slots. And what I use is a 2-inch oblong punch or a 2-inch bag punch. You can buy these. I bought this one at Weaver. It's a CS Osborne. They're probably $100 for this one, but it's well worth the money if you're making a lot of these. Otherwise, you're going to have to take like just a round punch, probably not that size, probably something around a number 10 or so. And then punch there, and then cut the slots in the middle. That can be very hard to do. It makes it more difficult, takes more time. I would highly recommend, if you're wanting to make a bunch of these, get at least a drive punch like this, a 2-inch slot. It's going to make your life a lot easier. You can use the pattern and go ahead and mark off where we've got the slots on that pattern. I'm going to just eyeball it on these because I've made enough of these. I kind of know where I want them. But basically I'm going to center it in that area there that we stitched, and then we'll punch through. And make our slot. And you can see how much faster that is than trying to punch 2 holes and then cut in between. That can be a real pain. And so now we've got both slots in there. So we'll do all of these, and then we're going to do one more step to the slots that I like to do that you don't necessarily have to do. But we'll go ahead and punch all these slots right quick. Alright, so we got the slots in all these sheaths. Now what I like to do, and if you have a nice round edger, you can do this. Some edgers aren't going to do this very well. It just kind of depends on which ones you have, but you may try it. I like to take the back side of this. As you can see, it's nice and open on the front where the punch went through. But on the back side, it's not as wide looking because that's actually where the punch exited. And so what we want to do is just take a number 4. I'm using a number 4 Ron's edger. But I just like to edge around the inside or the back side of that slot. To me, that makes it a lot easier to get the belt in there, and a lot less break-in time. You know, it's a little more comfortable to put on the first time when it's brand new. So I'll do that to all of these, and then we'll be done with these. These scabbards are ready to go, these sheaths are ready to go, and we'll be putting some tags on those and put those on the retail floor just in time for Christmas. Alright guys, that's our updated knife sheath video. Like I said, the pancake knife sheath is probably my favorite to build. It just goes together a lot easier. There's no rivets involved. It's 2 pieces of leather. There's not really any drying time or anything as far as like folding and forming, that kind of thing. Pancake sheets sell really well. You can I ask a little bit more for these than I do the foldovers, just because you've got a little bit more room to tool, I think, and I think they're a little bit more popular. And you've got twice the leather, roughly. I mean, it's a little bit more leather, but anyway, they're really good. You can make these for any kind of knife, any size, anything like that. They also make pancake pistol holsters and stuff like that. But these knife sheaths have always sold well for me in the shop. We've always made quite a few of them. They're a great upsell. If you're making belts, make them a matching knife sheath for an extra 50 bucks. They'll usually spring on that and go ahead and do that just because it's neat and it matches the belt. But as you can see in the video, there's not a whole lot difference than from the first video if you've seen that one. I just kind of updated it a little. Updated the pattern. Like I said, we added a little more meat there, and then I also added this tab here at the top. I think that just gives a kind of a little guidance when you're putting the knife in the sheath. Both the front and the back are not the exact same height, which can sometimes get a little cumbersome trying to get your knife to line up and go in there. And so this just kind of gives you something to bump against and then slide the knife in. They're really good sellers. They're a great way to use up your scrap leather. If you've got a lot of scrap leather laying around, anything from, I mean, you could make these out of 5 ounce, 5 or 6 ounce if you wanted to. I think that'd be just a tick light. But if you've got a lot of scrap, 5, 6 ounce, make a bunch of them, sell them at a little reduced price just because they are thinner, and it'll be a great way to put that to use. Like I said, if you're interested in getting the new pattern pack that we did specifically for this video, it's got 15 different floral tooling patterns in there, as well as the cut patterns for the front piece and the back piece, your interior stitch line markers, as well as the slots. Then you can get that. We've got a link down in the description. You can just click that. It'll take you to our website, and you can go ahead and purchase that pattern. It is a digital download only. We're not offering any printed version of that at this time. We may in the future, but right now it's easy enough to print out. It's quicker. You don't have to wait on the mail or pay postage. So you can just download that PDF file, print that out on your home printer. Be sure that your printer prints it out actual size or 100%. Don't allow it to scale it to fit to page or scale to fit or anything like that. That way everything's the same. Just check that slot measurement, make sure it's 2 inches, and you'll know everything's printed out correctly. I appreciate you guys watching. Be sure to go to dgsaddlery.com and sign up for the Leathercraft newsletter, and we'll see you guys in the next project video.